So hello everyone and welcome to a unique tutorial. Today we're going to be talking about the Ricoh Theta Z1 camera and the workflow for utilizing it to create some really nice 360-degree images. Now, you could be viewing this on one of three platforms. You could be viewing this video today on YouTube, and this is going to be kind of an advanced video for you, so we're skipping past a lot of things. Because you could also be viewing this video on Teachable or on Udemy as well. I've got a full-length class on Ricoh's Theta Z1, kind of start from finish to get you going on using the Theta Z1 for yourself. That class is available on Teachable and that class is available on Udemy, but I also wanted to include it here today on YouTube as well, because maybe some of our viewers on YouTube have some interest in the Theta Z1 and they haven't checked out the class yet. So recently, one of my students got in touch and they were looking for a streamlined version of my workflow and also an additional workflow. They had some interest in the new standalone Theta Stitcher. So what's the Theta Stitcher? Well, it's an application that Ricoh has put out to help us create 360-degree images. So the Stitcher takes our fisheye images and combines them together into a usable 360 view that can be used on most 360 viewing platforms. Now, recently a standalone version of the Stitcher came out, so that's what this student was asking about. But even with the new standalone Stitcher that doesn't require Lightroom usage, Ricoh still recommends utilizing Lightroom. So we're doing two different tutorials. The one you're seeing on YouTube today and in the class is one part. The second part of the tutorial will not use Lightroom and we'll show how you can work around utilizing Lightroom. But I wanted to show you right off the bat thetalab.ricoh's website, and they have how the Theta Stitcher works. So for dual fisheye DNGs, which is one image format that you can do with Theta Z1, shot in RAW or JPEG, developed here with Adobe Lightroom Classic. And so this is the workflow Ricoh recommends. It's actually the workflow that I use too and I recommend. Now, for those of you on YouTube, if you feel like we're diving in really deep, we absolutely are. And you can check out the class online. But if you have a feel for the Theta Z1 overall, then most of this tutorial should make sense to you, and you're very welcome to follow along. There are links down below, by the way, to the actual full courses. But so in answering this student, I wanted to not just show folks how to work around Lightroom, I also wanted to show folks that Lightroom is an integral part of this and is very useful. Scrolling down here, they are making mention of the new standalone Stitcher. So it used to be that you could only use the Stitcher if it was launched from Lightroom. And so that's their workflow up there. The intention was that you would launch the Stitcher from Lightroom to get your final product. Now you don't have to do that. So you don't have to put things together in Lightroom. You don't have to manage it in Lightroom. And you can work around, and that workaround is going to cost you time. So just so you know up front, it's going to be a longer process. So I wanted to show you the short process, why I like the process, okay? And I also wanted to point out to you here that on Ricoh's updated article, this article, they still do stress the raw editing software approved by Ricoh is Lightroom Classic 10.3 and above. So if you really, if you want to follow along with what the manufacturer is recommending, then cutting Lightroom out of this probably isn't your best bet. So what I'm going to do now, I've got my Ricoh Theta Z1 right here, and yesterday I took 3 images, well I set up for 3 images of the same room. I used some of the automated functions in the Theta Z1 just to generate a JPEG that I could use as a 360. It's very quick and very easy to do it. You can connect a smartphone or tablet up to the Ricoh via Wi-Fi, and you can control it all there. And so doing the JPEG HDR is what I did. It's an automatic mode, took seconds. After I did that, I took a second step. I did some bracketed images, overexposed to underexposed, and I did 5 brackets, so 5 images that are all raw files. They're DNGs. Finally, there is a plugin for the Theta Z1, a very interesting plugin called the Dual Fisheye plugin. So one really nice feature of the Theta Z1 is the fact that you can add plugins to the camera, which widens your ability for, advanced tools for the Theta Z1 down the road. Now, I just plugged the Theta Z1 into my computer, and I happen to have Lightroom Classic already turned on. So once again, I took one single JPEG in a fully automatic mode. Then I took 5 images, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 images, and we're going to merge those together. So those images were bracketed from some severe underexposure to some severe overexposure. We're going to blend those all together. Finally, using the Dual Fisheye plugin, I also photographed 5 brackets of the same room, but those brackets were merged together within the Ricoh Theta Z1, thanks to the Dual Fisheye plugins application. And so we've got one more image that's an HDR DNG, so it's already merged together. What we're going to do here is very simple. I'm going down to the right-hand corner of Lightroom, and I'm going to go ahead and hit import. So once again, we've got 3 different finalized images that we'll be getting out of this, and we're going to have to do a little work on one set of them. We're just waiting for this import to go. So all I had to do was plug the Theta Z1 into the computer. I already had Lightroom turned on, and we're good to go. Now, in the Lightroom interface, we're not going to be teaching a big tutorial on utilizing Lightroom or anything here, and we do have expanded information in this class for you as well. But we have 8 images in total. The first one is a JPEG. So this was the fully automatic selection. So we had the camera do everything. Basically, I can export this from Lightroom right now and upload it to any of the 360 platforms out there. Or I could view this in Affinity Photo as well, which we'll do in just a few minutes. So there was our first shot, by the way, fully automatic, controlled by my iPhone, and we just had it make all the decisions for us. Of course, we could do some editing in here now and enhance this photo a lot more. Now let's take a look at the next couple. Because like I said, I took 5 brackets, overexposed to underexposed. So here we have DNG 20459 DNG, and then 20460. So that's number 2, number 3, number 4, and number 5 of those brackets. And then I'm going to hit the arrow key one more time. And then we have one DNG that's kind of standalone, but it actually goes along with the merged HDR DNG. See the HDR DNG? So the Dual Fisheye plugin actually merged everything for us, gave us one reference image. So this reference image, 20464. If we arrow over, we have 20464 HDR DNG. So this is the final merge one. This doesn't look usable at all. It looks horrible, right? Yeah, it's going to not look so horrible in a few. But before we work with the HDR DNG, let's grab those 5 brackets, 3, 4, and 5. And if you're not familiar with Lightroom, one feature in Lightroom is actually merging things to an HDR. Now, we've all seen different types of HDRs, some super overcooked ones, some pretty crazy looking stuff out there. One thing I do like about Lightroom is their HDR merge is very subtle. When we merge these together, we're going to be creating an HDR DNG. That's what the camera did for us with the Dual Fisheye plugin. And these are going to be very comparable. But the thing is, I've got 5 photos here, so that's a lot of storage space versus 2 photos for that automatic HDR DNG generation. I'm selecting all 5 of these. I'm going down and I'm going to do a photo merge. I'm going to do an HDR photo merge. So it's going to take these 5 raw files and it's stacking them together, and it's going to do some settings for us to make this a more realistic scene. So we are just waiting for that to happen now. It's creating the HDR, and now it put it into a stack for me in Lightroom. So one of the things Lightroom will do for you is actually stack those things together so that you don't have a big cluttered view. So nice to keep things organized. But I'm going to click on that, and the first one that I open is the HDR DNG that we just made. So those 5 images that we merged together, here's the final result. It does look better than each of the components that went into it. Let's look at that. Super underexposed. And now we're coming up to almost a proper exposure, and then we're getting to overexposed as well. This looks a little more balanced because it's actually 5 images merged together. I can go into the develop module here, and let's take a look at this. It's a little dark in there for my taste, so maybe we'll brighten it up just a bit more, maybe about 1.45, and we can drop the highlights down a little more. The idea of that is so that we can actually get the detail out of the windows in here. So we have some extreme bright areas, we have some extreme dark areas. Can we balance them out? Yes, we can. We'll push the shadows up just a little bit more. And there we go. This is basically set to go at this moment. We could now merge this in the Theta Stitcher. So this is the HDR DNG that we wanted to work with. So what do we do? What's that recommended workflow? Well, let's go take a look back at Ricoh's recommended workflow, shall we? Shooting, use the camera. Development, use Lightroom. Okay, so we've shot, we've developed, we should probably stitch. So let's go back here, and I'm going to right click, and I'm going down to Edit In, and there's my Edit In Ricoh Theta Stitcher. Now, once again, for those of you on YouTube, I'm sorry if this is moving a little fast. I hope you don't feel too lost. I hope you are getting the idea of the workflow for this. And if you do have further interest in more of the ins and outs with your Theta Z1, I would suggest going down in the show notes below and checking out our class on Teachable or on Udemy. All right, so I'm going to edit a copy of this with Lightroom adjustments. This is going to be formatted as a TIFF, 16 bits, and we'll do 240 dpi. I hit the edit button here, and we're just waiting for it, and there it goes. It's going through its edit process now. And so this is what that final 360 ready image is going to look like. Looks good to me, stitched it together very nicely. You could pan through and check this closer, but I'm just going to say okay to this one. And now take a look at what we have. We have an HDR edit.tiff. So we can now export this. We could take a look at it in any type of 360 viewer. We could do some final touch-ups in Lightroom or Photoshop or Affinity Photo. You name it, we can play with those things. But I'm going to hit the G key here to go back to the grid view. So this HDR DNG, which we manually merged 5 images together with, we launched the Stitcher, and the Stitcher came back and gave us this final result. Very cool. Now, we had looked at those 5 images that we had manually bracketed. Let's take a look at that HDR DNG that Ricoh's dual fisheye plugin gave us. So on this one, you actually have to do some manual settings on the Z1 itself, on the camera itself, to set up for utilizing the dual fisheye plugin. By the way, I'm emphasizing this because I think if you are using the Theta Z1 for, let's say, interior real estate or interior tours, you are absolutely going to want to use the dual fisheye plugin. So there is a multi-bracket mode on the Ricoh Theta Z1 as well, where you can manually go in and set up multiple brackets. But the dual fisheye plugin does such an awesome job. Why would you make work for yourself? Why would you make that extra workload? You wouldn't, because if you're working for a client, time is of the essence. I'm going to hit the develop module here on this HDR DNG that was rendered in camera. Looks terrible, right? It absolutely does. We're going to bump the exposure up. Let's do it to about 2.5. We're going to drop the highlights down. If we drop the highlights down, boom, we got some visibility out that window. That's still looking a little rough. So let's go ahead. I'm going to pump shadows all the way up to 100. The highlights are down to negative 100. And this is starting to look appropriate. And that's starting to actually look good. So we've got detail out of the windows. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this, going through heavy editing. I'm just showing you the process so that you can get an idea of Ricoh's recommended process. So now that HDR DNG that was rendered for me in camera, thanks to the dual fisheye plugin, is basically ready to go. How many seconds did this take me to do? Not many. So we could push that exposure up just a little bit more. to get closer to reality of the room because it is actually a well-lit room. And we could go through here and pop just maybe a little bit of vibrance. We're not going to do too much with that, plus 20. Let's say we're satisfied here. I can now right-click in Photoshop, in Lightroom, go down to edit in the Ricoh Theta Stitcher. And it's going to be a TIFF, sRGB. And we're going to do that 240 DPI. I'm going to hit OK to that. And Ricoh's Theta Stitcher will automatically pop up for us again. Here it is. Hello, Theta Stitcher. So now we're waiting for it, and sure enough, we're ready to go. And it's telling us right here, its name's going to be 20464_HDR-edit.tiff. I hit OK on this, and it's going to pull this back in. So here we go. We're going to hit the G key again for the grid view. So let's see. This is 20464HDR-edit.tiff. That's the one. And if you take a close look at this, let's compare these two. So one, we actually had all 5 images, and then we had to manually merge them in Lightroom. The second one with the dual fisheye plugin HDR-DNG format, it gave us 1 image plus the HDR-DNG, and these came out pretty close. Let's go ahead and do an X and Y comparison. Very, very similar. So with just a little bit of fine tuning, both these images look almost the same, and 2 approaches to get there. So let's say we're satisfied with these. I'm going to hit the G key again, and let's say that we would like to view all of these in 360 format. So now we're getting away from the Lightroom side of it. So by the way, let's go back here again. We did the shooting, and we then imported to Lightroom, and we did our work in Lightroom, our development. We then stitched it with the Ricoh Theta Stitcher, and then we have a final product. All right, that sounds about right. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do an export, and I'm just going to, let me see here. I'm just going to go with full size. I'm going to put it in a folder called MLS full size. There's a whole other series of classes if you want to learn more about Lightroom. But I'm going to go ahead and export these. So we have 3 different ones. We've got the one that was created automatically by the camera in a JPEG format. Then we've got one that merges 5 DNG images together in Lightroom. Then we've got one where the merging already happened in the camera thanks to the dual fisheye plugin. I'm going to hit export here. And we're just waiting for, I think that export is already finished. So let's minimize these. And here we go. Got a folder. So we have that JPEG. So this was the original JPEG automatically done by the Ricoh software internally. We've got our first HDR DNG edit where we merged 5 images together. Then we've got our second one where the dual fisheye plugin came into play. And then we didn't have to import as many images. All looking very similar. And what can we do with these now? Well, just as a self-check, we're going to grab these and we're going to throw them into Affinity Photo. So Affinity Photo is another software package that I do use. I don't use it for the main workflow for doing my 360s. I use it to check my 360s afterwards. So we're looking at the first one here. So I've got 3 tabs up here. HDR-edit. There is our original JPEG. So this is full automatic mode, controlling the camera with my phone and having it do an HDR rendering. And this looks all right. If you're in a super hurry, this might be good enough. But let's go over here to layers. Let's go to live projection and let's do an equirectangular projection. And now we can look around that room. So we've got our full 360, and down at the bottom of this, we do have the monopod stand, so we could easily get rid of that. I'm just going to go and get this little brush tool here, and we'll just wipe out that monopod. So that is where I use Affinity Photo, and the student who was asking these questions had noted that I do use Affinity Photo. This is the part that I use Affinity Photo for, just checking out that live projection. I'm going to remove it. And there we go, we're back to that. I'm going to close this one down. So that's fully automatic. That's your quickest way to get right to your 360 is use an automatic JPEG mode from the camera itself. and just let the camera make all the decisions. These still do come out nice, and you could do a little editing on the back side. I'm not going to save this one. So now we've got the two different DNGs. We've got the 5.9 and we've got the 6.4. So the 5.9 was the one where we merged 5 together manually in Lightroom. And this is what we got out of it. And we can now go to Layer, Live Projection, Equirectangular, and there we go. There's that monopod stand. So in Affinity, I could wipe out that monopod. But looking around the room, this is looking really good. Up there's Jody's M&Ms. I forgot, I didn't really do major maintenance before we did this shoot because this is just for a demo for all of you. So once again, this one was the 5 images that we manually merged together in Lightroom. And finally, here is the HDR DNG generated by the Dual Fisheye plugin. All I did on the Dual Fisheye plugin was told it to take 5 images, and it really did a good job on balancing the lighting and the white color balancing for this image. Once again, I can go up to my layer, I can go down to live projection, and we can see how we like this live projection, and we can see that the Theta Stitcher did in fact do a good job of merging the images together. So my recommendation is just my personal workflow is that if you are using the Theta Z1, Lightroom is worthwhile. I know some people don't like the subscription model, but this is very nice, very easy, very streamlined, and very easy to manage after you've done your shoot. Now, if time is of the essence and you're working with clients and you have deadlines for them, you not only want to give them a really high quality product, you don't want to spend hours and hours and hours on it. And utilizing the Theta Stitcher with Lightroom is our most expedient path to generating good results for our clients. So there's going to be a second follow-up to this video. So there is the paint by numbers and why I'm using Lightroom and how quick this process is. And so the next lecture, which will be appearing on the Teachable and Udemy classes, we're going to go through utilizing the standalone Stitcher app where we're not using Lightroom. And that just gets into making folders and figuring out where to put things. And while it's not the most time-consuming thing in the world, it is going to slow the process down very quickly, very fast. So my recommendation for a workflow with the Theta Z1 is pretty straightforward. Use the Theta Z1, use Dual Fisheye plugin for interiors, utilize Lightroom to manage and do initial editing, and then use the Stitcher to stitch these things together into a usable 360 format. So for those of you who are class members, you're going to see a second video popping up down below this one, where we're going to go back through with the same exact images, not using Lightroom, using the standalone Stitcher app. And you're going to see this is going to take a little longer. So I'm not against it. I'm not trying to make you buy Lightroom, but I would like to stress that Ricoh on their Theta Lab website even says this is their recommended workflow. They built their Stitcher app around utilizing Lightroom. Now that the standalone is there, yes, they can do other things. They can manage in other ways. But for the most streamlined process, I haven't found anything faster, and I have tried out other processes. Now, once again, for the YouTube audience, some of this might have gone over your head. Those of you who are interested in the Theta Z1 might understand a lot of this, but if you'd like to get more in depth with utilizing your Theta Z1 and walking through its features and its functions on the mobile apps, then I would suggest checking out the classes. So up in the corner, up in the right-hand corner, there's an info button, and also down below in the comments, we have links to those classes as well. So, and for the students who are watching this in the class views right now, I hope this helps you understand my streamlined workflow, and we'll go back through the workflow without Lightroom as well. So you'll see that in the next video. All right, everyone, have a great one. I hope this was useful and informative to you, and we'll see you again real soon.